Well, hey friends, welcome back. Today we are doing a little Q&A. After I posted Container Design 101 Part 1 and Part 2, what I was noticing is there were questions coming through in the comments that I just thought to myself, these are such good questions, so maybe we should do a Q&A and dive in, and I'll give you some of my responses, because chances are, if one person is asking the question, there are multiple people who also have the same question. So let's go. First and foremost, we have at Newt 52864. Okay. This person says, love Wirevine and Mondo Grass. I was saying, yes, pick that one. Question. I have square, oh my gosh, tongue twister. Square concrete pots. How would you do them? I'm never sure when I pick. One backs up to the house while the other does not, and you see it from all sides. Okay, great question. Now, I actually have a client that has 2 square containers close to their entry, and I treat them differently. The first container is right by their front door, and it's kind of in like a little vestibule area. And that one you can see through the window next to the front door. I'll see if I can find a picture of it. But that one you see from the front door, so you can see outside and then you can see approaching, and it's in a bit of this corner. What I decided to do for the last, maybe the past year, is I actually planted my centerpiece in the corner and then did beautiful radius plantings around it. So I almost used it as like a little bit of a pivot, and then I designed the visual going out from there. So I had a columnar plant in the corner and then built my height out as a little radius coming down. Now they have a second container that you also see from all sides. That second one is a little bit bigger than this first one. And for that one, I actually plant it right in the middle and then do beautiful arrangements that can be seen from all angles. So when you have a square container, or any container for that matter, there is no rule that says they all have to match. You get to do whatever you want. It is your property. You get to have a good time. Okay, let's move on to another question. At Jennifer Wood 9151 says, could you buy the larger heuchera and split it in the pot? All right, friends, this is a really good question. So what she was referring to was when I was at Sky Nursery and they had the 1 gallon heuchera. And when I looked at that, the reason I would not do that is because there was no clear division point, and the plant was also much larger than I would have needed for this arrangement. So if I had put the heuchera in here, it would have been towering, and just wouldn't have been a good choice. However, she does bring up a really good point. A lot of times when you're at the nursery, you are going to select plants that are divisible. So I call that a free plant. So a lot of times during this time of year, what I will do is if I'm shopping in a nursery and I see something and I know it is really full and really mature, if it does have a clear division point like a grass, I will fully chop that sucker in half. So I have 2 in a container or a landscape. Gardener Phil. Okay, this is such a sweet comment. It says, you are so skilled at explaining in a clear and concise way. Thank you. Thanks for effectively demonstrating how to choose the right plant, size, container, and textures to pot up a well-designed planter. I would enjoy a similar video using plants for a shady area with maybe a square planter. Okay, so for a shady area, for a square planter, I would refer to the first question that was asked, but then also for a shady area, just so you guys know, this container I have designed to receive, let's see here, what time is it? Like 1-ish? And it is still in full sun. But as the sun passes overhead, it's going to be in the shade. Now, if you are doing a shady container, I would say your choices are going to be a little bit different. The heuchera is very flexible. Your viola is very flexible. Wirevine, I will even stretch it into a semi-shady condition and it'll be fine. Black Mondo Grass, again, really great. Now, the only place where you might get into a little bit of a discrepancy is with this osteospermum. It's really going to like a lot more sun. So I might choose another texture to go in the middle. You could also do a coleus. That would be fantastic. They are just now coming in because they like a little bit more heat. But you could easily convert this to something that will tolerate shade. Oh, and in terms of a centerpiece, I would look at some shade-loving shrubs like a sarcococca, for example. That would be beautiful by a front door. You get that beautiful scent coming in, and it's going to bloom at a time when not a lot of other things are blooming. Oh, the other thing you could do, instead of this osteospermum, you could throw in a late blooming hellebore. That would also be awesome. And then you can just pop that out in the landscape when it gets too root bound for this guy. Okay, next question. C. Shieldsy? 9920. So sorry, butchering that. Thanks, that was very helpful. Would also like to see how to choose flowers for a container of similar size but less plants. Something more simple but bold color. Perhaps plant choices that are fairly aggressive growers that will fill in quickly. Okay, this is another great question. Let's take this planter as your example. This has been planted for maybe a week, and we are already having our violas reach the edge of this container at multiple points. If you are wanting to reduce the number of plants, what you could do is you could take out this centerpiece and simply use all violas. The other great thing is if you simply wanted to reduce the osteospermum, just do all violas. There's a ton of bicolor violas that would be sensational. The Copperfield Deltini, that I would consider a bicolor because you get that kind of yellow mustardy front and a little bit of kind of almost like a purple, like a antique purple on the back. So that would be a great choice. So simply by removing this, you still have your heuchera, you still have your black mondo grass for texture, and then everything else with the violas. As we get further into spring, this is going to grow more aggressively. If I were to plant this in the fall, the violas would not take over as fast as they are here because in the fall, the temperatures are dipping and so the growth is not as fast. So like I said, just a simple option would be to reduce this, maybe change over for a bicolor viola so you still are vibrant and lots of great interest, and throw in a few more. So next question, it's actually an answer compiled from two different commenters. So the first one is at user TI6XR3ZB9N. Thank you, Kate. This was so helpful. What soil do you recommend and how do you fertilize? Do you use new soil each season? You are so talented. Well, thank you so much. And then another comment that's kind of in that same family is Jagoda Parrish Anderson, 5058. They say, such a pretty container. I too would like to see it grow over the seasons. How often do you fertilize containers and what do you use? Such great questions. Let's dive into the first one. Let's start talking about potting soil. You are going to fill this up bottom to top with potting soil when you first begin. What you're looking for at your local nursery or any local supplier is that it's just an organic potting soil. I use organic whenever possible. The one that I usually grab is made by a local company called Carpenitos. It's white bag, orange label. You see it all over the place. In any event, when you first start, you can have a little bit of drainage in the bottom if you want, a couple little rocks or pottery shards, and then you fill it all the way up with your soil. When I go to change this out, I'm being attacked by the wire vine. When I go to change this out, I'm going to pull out all the plants that I want to change. And I am not going to be particular about making sure I only get minimal soil. I take the whole thing out. So I'm left with a bunch of gaping holes. What I put in there is a little bit of potting soil, and I will mix in at that time a granular fertilizer to recharge the soil. So when I'm talking about a granular fertilizer, I'm talking about something that is like crumbly and dusty, and locally what I usually source is something by EB Stone. They're a great company, but again, you are looking for, when you go shopping, you want to look for something that promotes healthy blooms. And when you repot, you are looking for that granular. Now, when we are talking about fertilizing throughout the season, that is where I change what fertilizer I use. I am going to use something that is a liquid fertilizer, and I am going to fertilize probably like every 2 weeks or so with my normal watering routine. The ones that I gravitate towards locally, I have used Buddha Bloom. I've also used Tiger Bloom, both with great results. And again, those are ones that I can find here. I'm not sure what you have in your area, but you're just looking for something that is promoting blooms, because that's going to have all different numbers. I won't go into that. You don't need to be bored to tears with that today. Now, if you are using a self-watering container like this, I do want to show you something kind of interesting. Around the back, this is the True Drop watering system. And so what I can actually do is, instead of just filling this with water, I will pre-mix my fertilizer and then pour it in for my plants to drink up. So it makes fertilizing super, super easy. Okay, and last question for today is from Pete Frederick 3784. Just gorgeous. Thanks for the recipe and tutorial. I'm going to plant it. I'm thinking that if the planter is too small to all the moss plant under the black monograss, you could add a small pot under it so you get a variation of colors, or is 2 planters not pleasing, like planting in odd numbers in flower beds? Okay, this is a great question, and I wish I had a moss here to show you as an example. What I was actually thinking about after I posted that video, and this comment totally reminded me of it, mosses are crazy flexible. And if I had been thinking, I didn't want to overwhelm you with too many options, but what I would actually do is I would take that little 4-inch container and I would cut it right in half. So I had 2 2-inch strips of moss, and then I would just tuck it right in there and tuck it in on the other side. I do this trick all the time when I'm out of planting space, but I want that just little bitty bit of contrast, and then I let all my plants grow together. So cutting a moss in half is such a, I think sometimes people are afraid to get too rough with their plants, but when we're talking about a moss, cut that sucker in half, go for it. It will not hurt the plant at all. The next thing was putting another pot right here. And I will tell you, I absolutely love that. I'm not opposed to that at all. In fact, I love like 2 planters on one side and 1 on the other, because your eye will read it as a trio. The other thing you could do is, if you had 2 planters, you could put like a little sculptural element down here. Like for example, I have a little tiny astronaut, but I also have like an owl that I put out in the fall. I have a bunny that I put out in the spring. And so what that does is it creates, instead of just having 2 pots, it creates a little trio. So again, you're maintaining that balance. But even if you just have the 2 plants, what you want to make sure is that you're not placing them far away. You're placing your pots so it looks like they're in conversation with each other. Let me give you a real specific example. If I put a second pot right here in the same line as this planter, it would look awkward. It would look like everybody lined up for just like an awkward family photo. Instead, if I'm going to add a second pot to this front porch, I'm actually going to bring it forward and at a diagonal. So that's going to provide a lot more depth and a lot more interest at my front door. I hope this has been incredibly helpful. It was so fun to dive in and answer some of your questions. If you have anything else that you would like me to cover, please pop it in the comments below. I love producing content that you guys enjoy learning from, and so I'm always happy to oblige. On the radar, I have let's see here, hanging baskets, I have shade planters, I have watching this container grow throughout the season. I also have several requests for how I'm going to transition this out of spring and into full summer. So I am always listening, and I love to see your comments. So thank you so very much. I'm going to see you in the next one, but in the meantime, say hello to your garden for me. I'll see you soon.